This is a second bite of the straw, and probably a motion would be better in order to involuntary. I mean, I hadn't heard from Representative Hunter, and you heard his frustration. Wait a minute.
This is the same thing he did last week. Yeah. He got nailed on that. What was that? 1 month.
Yeah. Remember that time they came for, one guy came for the whole year, you remember that? For the whole session, man.
Okay, we're gonna make a call to Mr. Hunter, Ms. Pat, and we'll put all motions on hold right now, okay?
Thank you.
Representative Hilferty, you wanna? Okay, Representative Hilferty wants to voluntarily defer 623. She makes that motion. Is there any opposition to that? So ordered. Thank you, Representative Hilferty. All right, we had a request from the author to voluntarily defer. Ms. Pat, was that your motion?
Yes, that's what it was going to be.
Okay. We got a motion by Ms. Pat Smith to voluntarily defer HB 587. Okay. I think we're good, huh? Is Representative Carmody here?
He is present, sir.
Okay. If you don't mind, let me again go over the ground rules. We do have a 3-minute rule in this committee,
Yes, sir.
and that's for everyone who's for or against a bill. We got a timer, and it will ring, and when it rings, you must cease your questions or comments at that time. We got 18 members on this committee, and I want to make sure all members are allotted their fair share on this. I see people coming in, and we do have an overflow room, which is room 4 across the hall. If you do not find a seat in here, but we do have a good many seats left. So please, members, let's abide by the rules so we show a good example for the public, and the public will abide by the 3-minute rule also. So with that, Representative Carmody on HB 71.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, committee members. This morning.
Hold on, excuse me.
Yes, sir.
Ms. Righteous, into the record.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. House Bill 71 provides for the conservation of public military memorials.
Sorry about that, Rep.
That's all right.
On your bill.
Thank you, sir. As a matter of fact, I do have an amendment that the members should each have that I'd like to go ahead and ask the consideration of the committee to go ahead and adopt so that we can put the bill in its proper posture before we take it up.
Okay. Representative Smith, you have a question on something?
No,
right
I think
now?
you just left me on. I was trying to be quiet. You left me on. That's
Okay,
all.
Ms. Pat. I didn't want to just skip you. Okay, I'll ask Ms. Tina to read the amendment into the record. You don't have the amendment?
I've got a copy of it, Tina, if you need it.
You go. Right. Okay, Ms. Rices, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Amendment number 1 is technical. So amendment number 2 will, on page 2, between line 6 and 7, we will be adding a subsection C, and it will read, notwithstanding subsection A, a parish or municipal governing authority may take an action otherwise prohibited by subsection A if a proposition authorizing the action has been approved by a majority of the voters who vote on the proposition at an election held for that purpose. A parish or municipal governing authority may call an election for the purpose of submitting such a proposition to the voters.
Okay, Representative Huvall, you move on this amendment?
Yes, I do.
Representative Huvall has moved on amendment number 1582. Is there further discussion? Any opposition? So ordered. Okay, Representative Carmody, on your bill as amended.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members, I know that y'all have had a lot of contact from people all over the state, just like I have on this particular bill. As we've seen, this is such a controversial issue, and that both sides are certainly very dedicated to the way that they see the proposition. However, what the bill is aimed to do is to protect and provide for the conservation of public military memorials on public property. The amendment that was just adopted, as you can see, provides that if an elected body who has the custody of that public property were to receive requests or decide amongst themselves that it would be best to relocate that public military memorial or to put it somewhere else, then they would have the ability to do so by bringing the proposition before their voters and asking for consideration of just that proposition. I know that none of us want to be sitting here talking about this today. This is truly one of those things that we have so many other pressing problems. But like many of you, my family's been here since before this was a country. And many members of my family fought for this country. And I'm proud of their sacrifice. I'm proud of the fact that they contributed to where we are today. House Bill 71 this morning is an effort to make sure that those persons' sacrifices and their contributions are not just randomly tossed away into the trash bin of history. And I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, Representative Billiot.
Yes. Good morning.
Good morning, sir.
How you doing?
I'm fine, sir.
Let's talk about just a little bit about a place to store things when they are taken down, or things pertaining to this. And in your section here where you want to have the election to take place,
Yes, sir.
are we putting anything, or are you talking with any of the local governments on how they would store these artifacts while they're waiting to be replaced or put somewhere, or are we just going to just take them and put them in a back room and maybe never go back to visit them again?
Yes, sir. And Mr. Mayor, the House Bill 71 does not address or try to dictate to those public bodies as to what they have to do. It would be incumbent upon them to create the proposition on the ballot to explain exactly what they wanted to do in order for the public to understand what are we considering today.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Okay, Representative Smith on the question.
Thank you, Representative Carmody. Does this also look at usurping what a court has already ordered?
No, ma'am.
Okay, so it's only prospective then. Going forward is what you're looking at.
As I appreciated, it wouldn't become effective until it became a law.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Are you aware that if a city or has the right to govern themselves under home rule charter?
Yes, ma'am.
That
As
they
a
have the
Shreveport-
right to make those decisions rather than
Certainly.
doing what you're asking?
Yes, ma'am. And as many of you, I don't know each of your personal histories, but just like me, I served 8 years on the Shreveport City Council. We have a home rule charter. And it was pointed out to me as I was trying to lobby the committee about, well, Mr. Carmody, you were a city councilman. Didn't you find it kind of egregious when the Louisiana legislature would hand down these edicts to you? Yeah, I sure did, because it was almost like, why in the world would Baton Rouge want to come in and tell us in Shreveport what we could and could not do? Okay? Granted, courts have ruled that the legislature's been silent on this issue. Well, this is not to be silent. This is not to tell them what they can and cannot do. And with the amendment, it provides the opportunity, if indeed they have a necessity or desire to relocate, remove, or do whatever they would like to do, to put it in front of the voters. This is actually putting the power in the people's hands to make that determination. If they feel like within their public environment that this public military memorial needs to be, something needs to occur with it, then their elected official can place a proposition on the ballot before them, and if a majority of the voters agree with it, then that's what they'll do.
Well, my concern is that if you're actually, you actually are telling parishes what to do. If you've done this as a local bill for your parish,
Yes, ma'am.
for just the Caddo parish, then I could understand that you would have gone through the process of talking to people about whether or not they wanted to do this. But by this bill, you're telling all of those parishes with home rule that they have to go before the voters to do that. And I think we're still sending down an edict to them from the legislature to do something different than what their home rule charter actually tells them they should do.
Yes, ma'am. And Representative Smith, it wouldn't be just those home rule charters. It would affect all communities.
I understand
Yes,
that,
ma'am.
yes.
Yes,
All
ma'am.
right. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Representative Smith. Okay, I see no more questions. We have a lot of cards. I want to,
And Mr. Chairman, can I ask, there was a veteran here that had asked, he's got to leave, if he could actually come to the table first. I believe
Okay.
Bradley Hayes is the gentleman's name. But
Okay.
I would
Okay.
ask the consideration just on his part, and I'll yield the table.
okay, we got a question from Representative Stagney. Is it for the author? It's for Mr.
Yes,
Representative
Mr.
Coleman?
Chairman, I was just going to make a statement. Like Representative Carmody, I was a city councilman in Kenner for 8 years. The district I represented, we have a Veterans Park that has memorials there of Kenner residents that fought and lost their lives in battle. If Kenner voted today to remove those monuments, the planes that we have, the tanks, I would be very upset. But I would not try to create a state law to stop that from happening. This bill is well intended, but it's for the governing authority to adopt this type of measure. I don't see this as a state issue as much as I see it as a governing authority issue, and I'm not going to go back and try to tell a governing authority what to do in their locale.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, I do want to make a statement. We made it when we started the meeting. Many of you were not here. We have a tremendous amount of cards for and against, and we requested that if you're here with a group, that you get a spokesman to speak on behalf of your group. We will read into the record your name and where you stand on the bill, but we do not need to hear from everyone unless you so desire. Okay? And I will ask Mr. Major Bradley Hayes to come forward at this time.
I got all kind of stuff.
Okay, Major. Representative Huval in the seat, in the chair.
Proceed.
Yes, sir.
Thanks,
Just
Lee.
state your name for the minutes, please.
Major Bradley Hayes. Thank you for hearing me today. I'm appearing here on behalf of the Sons of the American Revolution. I'm the president of the George Washington chapter in New Orleans. I'm also the quartermaster of VFW Post 8973, New Orleans. I'm also a member of the Preservation Resource Center, New Orleans. I'm also on my way to work. I actually drill here in Baton Rouge. I'm at the 321st, just down by the governor's mansion behind Memorial Stadium. So I'm running over there right now. I just wanted to stand up and be heard. I want to appear here on behalf of all my fellow veterans, and I am asking you all to support this veterans protection legislation. I heard some of the questions directed towards Representative Carmody, and I really do believe that it's probably too late to do anything about what's happening in New Orleans right now. But all along, what we've consistently said in the veterans community is that this is just the thin edge of the wedge. This is the Pandora's box that's being opened when you practice the politics of destruction, when you start going after people, whether they be flesh and blood or whether they be made of stone. Already there's numerous cries for Andrew Jackson, a Revolutionary War patriot, to have his statue removed. Already there are other monuments being attacked around the country. This has truly opened a chapter of divisiveness in our history that's never been done. I also heard the questions directed towards Representative Carmody about the home rule versus the state interest. And what always perplexes me, as an attorney myself, the great number of bills that this body has passed and continues to pass and should pass that affect the corporate interest of this state. When Terrebonne Parish wants to dump toxic waste into Bayou Terrebonne out of Houma, that has absolutely, in a million years, no effect on Caddo Parish environmentally. And yet this body and this state government does police that and does say that the environment of the whole state of Louisiana is the corporate interest of everyone in Louisiana. The same way that if I were a tourist, and we have a lot of them in New Orleans that wanted to come from, say, Monroe and go visit New Orleans and go pay my hard-earned money to see the statues, the museums, the French Quarter, any of the cultural heritage, that is part of all of our corporate heritage here in the state of Louisiana. Regardless, what I am here for, very much so, is to protect veterans' monuments. I don't know if everyone is aware of the way that the United States Army views our heritage, but it doesn't matter if you are a Revolutionary War patriot or, like me, a veteran of Iraq and Afghanistan. All veterans are accorded the same interest, the same recognition in America. It doesn't matter if you were a Buffalo soldier who fought the Indians out west. We have a monument to them in Audubon Park in New Orleans. It doesn't matter if you're someone that wears this uniform. Just yesterday, many of you may have seen in Longview, Texas, a statue was actually toppled and destroyed, and it was not of some Revolutionary War guy. It was not of some Confederate guy. It was a guy wearing a uniform that looked just like this. And that's what's happening now when you go down this path. And we're asking you to please protect and serve and stop the direction that we seem to be heading.
Thank you, Major Bradley.
Thank you, sir.
We have no questions on the board unless one has any questions. If not, we thank you so much for your addressing the council.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Chairman and the chair.
I apologize for stepping out, but I had a judge that called me. But it's all good. You got to call them judges back. Okay. We're going to call up 3 people at a time. We'll start with the people who are present and would like to speak. Colonel Rob Manis, Brenda O'Brock, and retired Major Ron Chatelain. Can y'all come forward? Y'all were right there. Good. Okay.
Right here.
All right. Y'all can go in whatever order you want, but I would suggest you let the lady go first.
Ladies first.
Oh, gee, thanks. Okay, are you ready for me to shoot?
Yes, ma'am. You have a total
No.
of 3 minutes. Don't use that word.
Oh, sorry. This is a public meeting, too, isn't it? Did everyone get my brochure from Janet? I'm Brenda O'Brock. I'm from Shreveport. I want to thank Representative Carmody for this House Bill 71. I have some notes here, but I want to deviate a little bit. Can we just grow up on this issue? I don't care if we have white supremacy and stone, the word slavery. Can we just grow up over this? Can we? I think students should be paraded to these monuments. There were hateful people back then. Our students need to be strong. You don't hide things in a corner, in a scourge of darkness, unless you're ashamed of it. I'm ashamed of anyone who thinks like that. If you've ever heard stories from people like the man to my right, Major Ron Chatelain, on the battlefield, and I don't care if they are Confederate soldiers, Vietnam soldiers, soldiers of Desert Storm, their blood is red, and we need to know about it. Now I'll try to follow some of my notes. All veterans' lives matter. Those who serve today in the military and the police, and those who served 150 years ago. If you've, who are here who aspires to live in an open and free society? It is un-American for anyone or any board to decide who or how our citizens will commemorate our veterans for the last 60 years. You realize you take these monuments down, you're going to decide for the people what they will commemorate. I have family members who died in the Civil War. I'm going to mention some battles that they were in. The Battle of New Orleans in 1862, Gainesville, Virginia in 1862, the Battle of Chickamauga in Georgia in 1863. Thomas Burns, he's my family member. I'm a United Daughter of the Confederacy. He was age 30 when he died on the battlefield. William Gideon Morris, age 26. Amon Perry Morris, age 37. Christopher Columbus Morris, age 21. He discovered a bullet on his birthday on the battlefield. You can laugh, because you know what? Anybody in our family has a great sense of humor, and we honor our veterans.
You need to wrap up. Thank you. Who's next?
Good morning, members of this council. It's my pleasure to sit here before you. It's the first time I've sat before one of these.
Identify yourself, please.
My name is Ron Chatelain. I'm from Shreveport, Louisiana. I'm a New Orleans transplant. My folks moved north when I was 4 years old. And I guess we're in that other part of the state, north of the Mason-Dixon line in Alexandria. But we're all Louisianans. And I served 20 years in the military of the United States, U.S. Army, proudly. And I look at my ancestral heritage of those that inspired me to join the military in support of our country. And my dad and my granddad and others who taught me honor, respect for each other, and to go the extra mile and stand up for what we believe in this country and the proud state of Louisiana. And I felt if I did any otherwise, I'd be disrespectful for those who have served. These monuments to those cause, only those who have served in the military and served in combat understand what that respect means and that honor. And to disrespect that is unfathomable. There are those who stepped to the plate. They did what they had to do. They risked their lives. And there are those who gave their all for our country and those of the proud state of Louisiana, while others stood on the other side of the road, afraid to cross the yellow line and disrespect those who did. There's a history here that should not be put aside. Lest we do, if we ignore history and destroy it, we're apt to repeat it. And we're a progressive nation. We should not be looking back. We should be pulling together and looking forward and respecting each other, and especially respecting those who have committed to their lives to the military in support of this country and made this country great. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for your service.
It was an honor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can I ask Mr. Chatelain one question so he can answer it for you?
If you make it quick, it's your time.
What's that badge on the top of your medals there, which are all combat decorations, by the way?
It's the Distinguished Service Cross.
What about the badge, though, the CIB? Tell them about that.
The blue and silver badge is the Combat Infantry's badge. It's only awarded to those of the infantry who spend at least 30 days or so in combat minimally. Most of those who have this badge are impaired in some manner, or they're no longer with us. And it's an honor to wear that badge in their honor.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Major, and thank you for your service. And thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm retired Air Force Colonel Rob Maness from Madisonville, Louisiana. I served for 32 and a half years in the United States Air Force, from the lowest enlisted rank to the rank of full colonel, and retired in 2011 and came back here to home to Louisiana. I'm here as a ninth generation grandson of Private William Maness, Jr. of the American Revolution's Continental Army. I'm here as the great-great-grandson of both a Union soldier and a Confederate cavalryman. I'm here as the son and brother of Air Force and Army veterans. I'm here as the father of 3 U.S. military sons, 1 veteran who just left the Army, and 1 airman and 1 sailor. I'm here as a former commander who has the daunting responsibility for young American and enemy lives every minute of the day in combat. I'm here as a U.S. veteran and a family member of a man who sacrificed much for his country, a man who is by law a U.S. veteran regardless of the color of his uniform in the Civil War. I want to tell you how grateful his family was that the United States saw fit to try to reconcile with each veteran in that war, regardless of the side they were on. I remember as a boy being shown my great-grandmother's handwritten note to the governor and the then War Department because her mother could not read or write, expressing the deep gratitude she and her mother felt that their father and husband, Confederate veteran, was being honored by our nation as a U.S. veteran and would receive all the rights, privileges, and benefits as all other veterans have. Ladies and gentlemen, these monuments that are still standing in New Orleans are not about some long-lived racial issue, even if they might have been at one time in our history. These veterans' monuments are battlefield markers, honor the sacrifices of all U.S. veterans and their families in that war, as they should be honored. Please remember that many family member descendants continue to live in this nation and our state today, many that have loved ones buried on battlefields in unmarked graves, and see these statues and monuments as the only place where they can honor their veterans' sacrifice. I ask that you all give serious consideration that our nation has seen fit to reconcile to the United States all her veterans several years ago, and that you do the right thing by passing this bill with a favorable report and pass this bill.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your service.
Thank you.
Reverend Marcel, you have a question for someone at the table? Okay. Oh, excuse me, Miss Pat. Coming to you.
Thank you. I'm sure. What's your name again, ma'am?
Brenda O'Brock. I'm with Louisiana Power Coalition, which is a statewide organization. I live in Caddo Parish.
And Ms. O'Brock, I want no disrespect here, but the issue of growing up, at 71, I'm grown up.
Good.
I've grown up in a cloud of racism. I have family members that fought in the World War II, and my daughter not recently, but is a Air Force veteran who had to endure many different kinds of things as an Air Force veteran. But while you say grow up, I really don't see many people who look like you sitting out here who take to task those white supremacists who take on us under the guise of racism. I don't see many of you sitting out there who look like you, who take to task our Jeff Sessions, who says slavery was an error in our country. So I'm saying that you say grow up, but there's so many other people that haven't grown up, and we have to endure what they give us to endure and to defend who we are. So growing up and having to see how history has changed, and when you talk about going backwards, Colonel Manis, we have gone backwards. We've gone backwards in this country because today, too many people can't walk down the street without being called ugly names, without being called things that they were called in the 40s and the 50s when I was growing up. So I understand where you're coming from, but you're going to have to not do it on one side. You're going to have to also stand up for what's right for everybody. And you're going to have to take to task those individuals who don't stand up for what you might believe in. So I'm making a statement and not asking a question. But if you want to respond, I would appreciate it. Thank you.
Are you talking to me? Yes.
I would also like to respond.
Yes,
Mr.
I would
Chair.
like to respond. Yes, you need to get over it. You need to get over it because
Hey,
I
let
could.
me let y'all know the rules.
I didn't disrespect you now.
Okay.
Let-
No,
let's-
and I'm
hold
just
up, hold up. I got this mic, and I can cut yours off. I don't want to do that. We're going to be respectful. Okay, Miss Pat had a right to make a statement. If you want to answer her in a respectful way, I'll let you. But we're not getting into a debate. We're going to be respectful of each other all day long. We have a lot of people to talk. So if you want to answer her respectful and not in a debate manner, you're welcome to do that.
All right, thank you. Yes, Representative Smith, I understand your sentiment. And just like I know that there are hateful people out there, there were then, there are now. I'm sorry that you were disenfranchised. I'm sorry that I can't do anything about that except come here today and try to bring solution and let you know that I've been through things too. And I could tell you stories in my own family. It had nothing to do with skin color, but ways that my family have been disenfranchised. And that's why I say get over it, because I've gotten over it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Representative Smith. I appreciate you bringing up that point of view because it's very important. As I mentioned, I was a commander in the United States Air Force. I was responsible at one point for things like implementing the sexual assault prevention program. So I understand many of the issues that you mentioned with your daughter's service. I also want to point out that these monuments aren't seen as white supremacist monuments, even though the media is calling them that over and over. The one that was is gone. We're here to talk about protecting U.S. veterans. U.S. veterans, and excuse me, ladies and gentlemen, but this is a state and national issue, and there is precedent in other states for laws like this that just require a people's vote in order, instead of just some small municipal body, in order to do a major move like what the ones you're seeing in New Orleans are. And you're right, I have stood up to white supremacists. In my last statewide campaign, I stood up to a man named David Duke when all the other candidates that were running in that U.S. Senate race ran and kept their mouths shut. You betcha. Yes, ma'am. It has no place in our life today. It has no place, just like what happened last night at the Jefferson Davis Memorial when some pro-monument folks were peacefully gathered. They were surrounded and assaulted with eggs and spit, and the pictures that I saw reminded me of the pictures of the white people spitting on the little black girl that had to be escorted into the school back in the days that you were referring to. So yes, ma'am. You bet, and I'm with all due respect, the people on the other side of this issue are using the same tactics that were used against people of color, and it's despicable. Slavery was despicable. It was an egregious error that our country and our nation made, and we still haven't gotten over it. But you know what? I agree with my friend James Carville, who's married to my better friend, Mary Madeline. He said, we should name the parade field after General Sherman over at LSU because he loved LSU and he was the first president of LSU. Well, let's all come together, leave the remaining 3 veteran statues alone and the rest of the veterans' memorials and battlefield markers alone so these families, and I'm one of those family members that do honor my veteran no matter what side they were on, can continue to do that. Let's name that parade field after Sherman because it should be. And let's reconcile this state and move forward. Yes, ma'am, you bet. I will stand with anybody to fight white supremacism.
Thank you, sir. Thank you all very much. I'd like to call up Bonnie Farr, Randall Gyro, and Pierre McGraw. If you are willing to come forward and you want to speak at this time, please come forward. You're welcome to wave it off if you don't want to come to the table. It's up to you. Come on down. Ms. Bonnie, I would call on you first.
Thank you, sir. I am Bonnie Farr. I am with the Louisiana Power Coalition, and I am from Shreveport, Louisiana.
Okay, hold on one second. I'm going to try to get your mic turned up. We need to get it close to you. Try it again.
How's this?
Perfect.
Thank you. I'm Bonnie Farr. I'm from Shreveport, Louisiana. I'm with the Louisiana Power Coalition. I have been asked to read this to you from Reverend C.L. Bryant, a pastor, a conservative activist, filmmaker, radio host, and former president of the NAACP of Garland, Texas. He could not be here today. He's in Washington, D.C., but he forwarded this message and wants it on record concerning our Confederate monuments in HB 71. He asked that this following statement be of record and in the hearing today on this bill in the House Committee in Room 6 at the Louisiana State Capitol. Open quote, "I am fully persuaded that the healing of America will come from the South, not because we are the least among Americans, but because we have proven over time that we have been strong enough here in the South to overcome so many of the demons that still plague this vast majority of our nation. I was born in the Confederate Memorial Hospital in Shreveport, Louisiana, 61 years ago. That fact is the greatest testimonies to an American success story that could not be told if the historical truths were to be hidden. I am convinced that the Confederate monuments give all of us the opportunity to have honest discussion about our past, our present, and our future. And any politician, son, daughter of the South, black or white, that favor removing historical monuments are locked in the hypocrisy of political correction. History must be taught, not evaded, and conveniently revised by spineless, pandering politicians. The South is rising again. There are people from all over America moving south. Let us not let those immigrants change us, but let us change them, how to assimilate, and show them how we Southerners are winning a monumental civil war. This Pandora box must not be opened, because there's no place that effects of this folly can logically stop. MLK Boulevard, be it Jefferson Memorial, it will be the beginning of chaos. Closed caption, Reverend C.L. Bryant.
Thank you, ma'am.
Do I have a moment to put my thoughts in?
You can close just one sentence.
That's okay.
Thank you. We have to do that. We have a tremendous amount of cards.
Sure.
Randall Gyro, you want to go next, sir?
Yeah.
Identify yourself.
Mr. Chairman and committee members, my name is Randy Gyro. Thank you for allowing me to address you today and speak in favor of the military monument protection and conservation. I'm a lifelong resident of Point Capee Parish and a past president of the Historical Society there. Although having never served myself, I have great respect for those who have served and protect us. I'll humbly follow the gentlemen that were sitting up here a minute ago. One way to continue to give them respect is to protect monuments dedicated to them as much as possible. In Point Capee, we have only one soldier monument on public property, but it's a good one. John Archer Lejeune, the greatest leatherneck of them all, the father of the Marine Corps. It's not in trouble yet, but at some point in the future, a select few could come in and want to take it down, and that would be wrong. We need a bill like this to maximize its protection. Right now, there's a growing list of monuments in Louisiana that are on a hit list. One of them is a World War I monument in New Orleans. It's a grand arch. It's like a mini Arch de Triomphe. And they want to take it down simply because the names of the soldiers that are on it are not in the order that they want it to be. This is craziness. Speaking of New Orleans, there's a statue to the state's greatest adoptive military man, a notable general who saved New Orleans from foreign invasion, our future president, General Andrew Jackson. An unbelievable victory over the greatest fighting force in the world at that time. One of New Orleans' most iconic jewels, the Jackson statue in Jackson Square. Voting for this bill would be a great start in maintaining the respect of all American veterans, respect that they deserve. A wise, honorable, great man and veteran once said, "Do your duty in all things. You cannot do more. You should never wish to do less." Let's all do our duty today and move this bill forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gyro. Mr. McGraw, identify yourself, please.
Thank you. I come here today to bear witness.
We need you to say your name, please.
Well, I was leading into that.
Oh, excuse me. Keep going.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I come here today to bear witness to the challenges facing Louisiana's veterans monuments. I'm Pierre McGraw, founder of the Monumental Task Committee, a nearly 1,000-member, all-volunteer organization whose mission has been to repair and restore public monuments. For almost 30 years, we have restored monuments at no cost to cities, parishes, or the state. Some examples of our work since we've been moving outside of the New Orleans metro area, including a monument in St. Francisville, one in Plaquemines Parish, and the Washington Monument right here near the old Arsenal complex. So I know a little bit about Louisiana's monuments. Louisiana is in the midst of celebrating her 300th birthday. Natchitoches already getting a start on the rest of us. Aside from general neglect, we haven't had any real monument problems in 300 years until now. By their very nature, our monuments are meant to be permanent objects that take messages to future generations of Louisianians. But times are changing. These monuments put up and paid for by Louisiana citizens and dedicated to our Louisiana and U.S. war veterans are often disrespected, vandalized, and sometimes removed. It is concerning that we even have to consider a bill to protect memorials to Louisiana veterans, but we're living in troubled times. House Bill 71 is probably the easiest bill to consider this entire session. It has no complicated tax formulas, no long-term impact studies needed, no financial downside, no expense in manpower. It is brief, simple, and to the point, yet meaningful and very necessary, and it's the right thing to do. Statewide scientific polls conducted by The Advocate, WWL-TV, and LSU revealed that over 70% of Louisianans favor keeping all of our state's monuments. These polls suggest that it would be very popular for politicians to pass a law to protect these cultural treasures. These polls also suggest that it would be very unpopular to voters if you do not pass a law to protect Louisiana veterans' monuments. People who oppose such legislation are on the wrong side of this issue. Passing a law to protect veterans' memorials is on the right side. Do the right thing and make Louisiana proud.
Thank you.
Questions?
No questions. No, she's just waiting in the wings. Thank y'all very much for your testimony. I'd like to call up Senator Beth Mizell, Senator Don Milkovich, and George Schmidt.
We're going from left to right. From left to right.
And senators, I don't know if y'all are aware, we got a 3-minute rule, and we abide by it for everybody.
Is that 2 minutes for state senators?
No, I'm gonna give you 3 minutes. Just thank y'all for being here.
Thank you to the committee. I appreciate the opportunity. And this Beth Mizell, State Senator, District 12. Couple of things. My district is a small rural district. I mean, we're sparsely populated. We do have a veterans monument, as Representative Whitewell knows, in front of our Franklinton courthouse. And in thinking about that, to address Representative Stagney's concerns, those men sacrificed under the flag of the United States, not under a home rule charter flag, not under their loyalty to the local municipal rules. Their blood was shed for this country as a whole, and that is timeless. So that's my concern, is that we have taken this and we've marginalized their sacrifice into the will of a small municipality. Their sacrifice was for a much larger cause. I've gotten letters. I had a bill last year to address monument concerns, and it's not a Confederate monument concern. My son was a Marine. My husband was in the Navy. My son would call me from Afghanistan, concerned that, Mom, all these guys, I can see we're not going to be remembered. We're over here, and something has started that's going to affect veterans from this point on. And I think some references have been made to that. But since that bill last year, I've gotten letters from all over the country because New Orleans is a beautiful city with such a strong cultural heritage that I've had tourists from all over the country contact me about their concern for what's happening. And one letter from a woman said, this was a quote I was never aware of, that after the war, General Lee pleaded against a militia army that was rumored to start. His plea was, and this is his quote, "Dismiss from your mind all sectional feeling and bring your children up to be Americans." And more than anything, that's what we are here today. Those statues represent Americans who made sacrifices and veterans who are still making those sacrifices today. So I asked you to appreciate that sacrifice in a timeless way. Use the errors of the times that were taking place as teachable moments, lest we will forget. God knows we don't want to forget the errors, and we look back, and I appreciate what Representative Smith said. We all have much to learn. I grew up as a child of the 60s in Bogalusa when civil rights was a blazing fire, and I know in my generation we learned from that. We learned from the errors of what maybe we saw the bigotry of some of our parents. So there was much to be learned, but I believe that's something that's appreciated. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Milkovich?
Yes, Chairman and members, I'm not sure that my comments will be quite so eloquent as those of Senator Mizell. I am in favor of the bill. Our history is imperfect.
Give us your name.
John Milkovich. Our history is imperfect. It's noble. It's ignoble. It's beautiful. It's less than sublime. It's heroic. It's wrong, and it's right. But it's our history. And I'm really just going to hitch my wagon to Senator Elbert Guillory's star. He made the beautiful comment last year in the Senate committee that if we start ripping the pages out of the book of history based upon who happens to be in political power at the time or who's got the most sway, we're going to continue to rip pages out of that book, remove pages, and if enough different groups are in power at different times, we will end up with a book of history that has been bereft of all of its pages. Every one of those pages belongs to every one of us. And I'm concerned that we could end up with a book of history that's empty of its pages, empty of the lessons, empty of the heroism, and empty of what Senator Mizell calls the teachable moments. I believe we should exercise the greatest of caution in tearing down our history. We do not need to ignore our history. We need to learn from it. We need to preserve it, and we need to embrace the truth about it, both good and bad. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, members, for the hard work that you have before you. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Mr. George Smith, please identify yourself.
Yeah, my name is George Schmidt. I'm an artist. I have a gallery on Julia Street in the historic Lafayette Square area. I'm about 2 blocks from the Lee Monument, and I'm personally representing the people that actually make this stuff, right? Artists and sculptors, painters. That's what I am, a painter. And I'm involved. Part of my circus animals that I tried out are history paintings. However, I came across something I think is a term that's very important to this committee. It's a definition of a term known as cultural genocide. It involves the eradication and destruction of cultural artifacts, such as books, artworks, and structures, and the suppression of cultural activities that do not conform to the destroyer's notion of what is appropriate. Motives may include religious ones, that is, like iconoclasm, as part of a campaign of ethnic cleansing in order to remove the evidence of a people from a specific locale or history as part of an effort to implement a year zero. I recommend you look up that term. It was invented by Pol Pot in Cambodia. He killed thousands of Buddhists, okay? In which the past and its associated culture is deleted and history is reset. The suppression of indigenous culture to invaders and colonizers, along with many other potential reasons. From 2014 to 2015, in areas that it controls, the Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant have carried out a campaign of cultural cleansing, destroying artifacts and historical sites in a campaign of iconoclasm waged against what it believes is idolatry. Included in this campaign are destruction of Shiite Islamic sites, including shrines and mosques, and artifacts that do not conform to ISIL's interpretation of Islam. We have to defend history. History is an exciting event in the human race, but for God's sake, don't just go back to 1965 and the Civil Rights Act. Things happen. They're continuously happening. History is not pleasant. It's like what Cicero said. History is poetry. It's not a reality. And those monuments are the poetry of the people like me that make it. Alexander Doyle created one of the most prominent sculptors from Philadelphia, folks. Philadelphia, not Montgomery, Alabama. He created the Robert E. Lee statue and the Beauregard statue, one of the greatest equestrian statues in the United States. It ranks with the statue of Sherman by St. Gaudens in New York. We can't allow this to happen because it's not going to stop. Oh, you see that column over there? That's Greek. You know, the Greeks had slaves. Take down that column. That's the kind of logic we're dealing with. I thank you.
Thank you. All right. A little warning. A little warning. We'll have no clapping or booing.
Oh, that's just I'm a singer. They're clapping for my singing.
Yeah, you did a good job. But we're not going to have that. Okay, we're going to keep order in the room, and I appreciate your emotions, but we're not going to have it, okay? We're going to call up Charles Saucier. I think this is Mr. Marksy or Marks? Marks Berry, okay. Kind of, I don't know.
Richard?
Yes. Did you write over your?
I did, because it was only.
Well, come on, you can tell us who you are. And then Patricia Gay. Thank y'all. Identify yourself, whatever. Ms. Gay, you're going to go first, I guess. I know these gentlemen are gentlemen.
Absolutely.
Well, I'm happy to.
Right.
I'm Patricia Gay from New Orleans. I'm director of the Preservation Resource Center of New Orleans. I'm here to talk about a totally different aspect that hasn't been mentioned yet today regarding this. It's from an urban planning perspective. The monuments are an important part of our historic built environment, and as has been said, a wonderful opportunity to promote more learning in our community. But I would like to also tell you something that I read just a few days ago in the Smithsonian Magazine. It was about Jefferson Davis, who had been in prison for 2 years. And 3 strong Union leaders put up the money to get him out of prison. And I don't have the quote that I think it was Horace Greeley, very vehement, said, "It's time to move on. We need to heal our wounds. This is over. Let's move on." That was 2 years, and he was released from prison at that time. I'd like to add one more thing about P.G.T. Beauregard. Maybe you're aware of this, but he helped 500 freed slaves become enrolled in the Democratic Party so that they could vote. So, I mean, there's much more that I could learn from these statues and on the discussion that's going on. I hope that you will keep that in mind about how much there is for us to learn. And I would like to say that the historic built environment is very critical New Orleans and the state of Louisiana, we actually rank number 1. Occasionally, we're almost always in the top 10 in use dollars invested through the rehab tax credit. This is related to tourism. The more we save here of our historic built environment, the more we are going to move Louisiana ahead. I debated whether to mention the fact that we have ranked 50 in prosperity, and even our city doesn't do too well, but we are at the top, and not per capita. When it comes to what we have done with our historic built environment, that means economic development. And I would love to work with this committee, because I think every single community throughout our state has much more potential than we're taking advantage of to have progress and to increase the quality of life of every citizen in Louisiana by focusing on our culture and our historic built environment. And please consider this impact. I appreciate your allowing me to speak here today.
Thank you, ma'am. Next, identify yourself, please.
My name is Richard Marksberry. I'm from New Orleans. The way I see this, that you can kill 2 birds with 1 stone. The one everyone has been speaking about this morning is just a rational decision to protect veteran monuments throughout the state. And I'm not going to go into great detail on that and focus less on the city of New Orleans. The issue of home rule and things, that I believe the legislature provides money, or the state does, to the city for advertising for tourism. And so the state has a vested interest in that as well. And I also think the amendment covers some things where it's true democracy, not representative democracy, true democracy, because what happened in New Orleans was not an example of representative democracy. Second point what I want to make is about violence. The Sergeant at Arms passed out 2 flyers that you can see. A lot of misinformation is coming from the city. And you can see from the scribbling on the monuments that the racial slurs go both ways. The other night, I lived in New Orleans. I counted it up. I didn't count it. I used a calculator. 15,962 days. And of those, except for 7, I could have gone to the neutral ground on Jefferson Davis Parkway at any point in time. There would have not been anything there. It's only been the last 7 days, and I've been there every 7 nights. This is a man-made disaster, just like the engineers did in New Orleans with the levees. Man-made disaster. It's never been the case before. I'm a professor at Tulane. I work with young people all the time. I've never seen in my life anything like I saw 48 hours ago in New Orleans. There are about 35 supporters of the monuments sitting down in their chairs, talking, doing whatever. Yes, some of them had guns. There were 272, as I counted, people that were delivered there. It wasn't a racial issue, as the newspapers presented. Of those 272, there were 11 African Americans, 11. All the rest were college-age students between the ages of about 20 and 25, throwing rocks, throwing bottles. Those are the Antifa. If you don't know who the Antifa are, I suggest you all look at it. Because if you don't pass this bill, they'll be in Baton Rouge, they'll be in Shreveport, they'll be in Lake Charles, they'll be in Monroe. These are people that are anarchists. Read what I gave you. Take them down allied with the New Orleans Worker Group. Look at their mission statement. It's on the black and white page. You'll see what they're suggesting. They're on that same page with the take them down with Andrew Jackson, the overthrow of the federal government. That's their mission statement. They're anarchists. And what's going to happen is there's no control. Right now at Jefferson Davis Memorial, we have 6 vans, 15 police, 4 trucks protecting that monument at the cost of thousands of dollars. This will come to all of your communities. You can prevent that if you at least protect the monuments where you are. Otherwise, you're not going to stop. Our mayor opened up a crevice in the earth, and out of it came Antifa. And just last night on the national news, they were in Portland, Oregon, burning in the street, wearing their mask. I don't have a mask on today.
Thank you, sir. Okay. Next, please identify yourself.
Hello, members of the committee. My name is Charles Sochet. I'm a Tangipahoa Parish resident and a member of the Libertarian Party of Louisiana. I'm here to speak on the freedom of speech for past generations who left testimony about their feelings at the time, and they felt so strongly about it, they carved it in stone. And I think it's a travesty that we are considering discounting their testimonies. We need more monuments. I think the city of New Orleans is on the right track by creating a slave museum. We need to learn from history. And if we only presented with one side of a story, we can't learn from it. And so I'm rising in support of this bill. I hope y'all will pass it. And with that, I conclude my testimony.
Thank y'all very much. Appreciate it. We'd like to call either Ned or Neil Mackey, Franklin Jones, and Sherry Barrow. Ms. Barrow, if you would, identify yourself.
Franklin Jones.
Sherry
Barrow.
Okay, you can go first, too.
Okay, work with me because I don't public speak.
I'll help you.
As a member of Monument Task Committee, I have scrubbed those monuments when they've been messed up. I have been called honky. I have been called cracker. I have been spit at. I have had things thrown at me. At Beauregard was Creole. He was black and he was Brazilian. He was, to young black people, he's an inspiration. He did a lot. He's one of the first people to fight for a black man's right to vote. And I'm trying to defend this. They need to know this. They need to be educated. That's why those statues are out there. These were put up years after the Civil War. We felt, where's the money to put up monuments during a war? We didn't have money for that. Beauregard even went up in 1913, and General Lee never owned slaves. He inherited some, he educated them, freed them immediately. And Davis was the only president of the Confederacy. And he did other things, but I'm nervous and can't get into that were good. You know, we should all be proud. It's all of our heritages. Many black people owned slaves too in New Orleans. If you ever, I encourage everybody needs to learn. Look at a 1960 census record. It says free whites and free blacks. You know why? Because there were enslaved whites and there were enslaved blacks. And I only say white first and black reverse because that's the way the paper was written. And that's the way I saw it. But we need to learn, and we cannot be squished. Now, what he said, I was out there over the weekend at Davis, and I saw those Antifa, however you say, those kids from Tulane. They're Northerners. They don't care about this state. They do not care about the tourism. Okay? These kids are anarchists. They don't care about any of your positions sitting there. They scare me for the democracy that is America from what I've seen out of them. We really need to wake up at what's going on. All of us. There was one more thing I wanted to say. Oh yes, as tourism, as I was scrubbing those monuments, approaching me are tourists from out of town that say thank you, but what I noticed the most, the tourists that shook my hand were from Europe. They're watching worldwide. They come to our city, our state for heritage. That's where we make the most of our money. We cannot lose that. Thank y'all very much for your time and hearing me.
Thank you. You did pretty good.
Hurry.
Who's next?
I'm Franklin Jones. I'm an attorney in New Orleans. I represented the
parties that filed suit in federal court to prevent the monuments from being removed. Two of the parties whom I represented were the Louisiana Landmark Society, which in the 1950s saved Gallia Hall, and in the 1960s prevented the destruction of the French Quarter by opposing the Riverfront Expressway. I also represented, and happily so, the Foundation for Historical Louisiana, which is very active in this area and manages the old Louisiana Governor's Mansion. I'm here for the limited purpose of telling this committee that Representative Carmody's bill is accomplishing or seeks to accomplish exactly what most of the other southern states, our sister states, have done. It is not a radical approach to this issue. It is not legislative overreach. North Carolina, South Carolina, Tennessee, Mississippi, Georgia, Arkansas, and Virginia all have statewide laws that protect monuments. Alabama may pass a law within the next couple of weeks doing the same. They all take different approaches. At one end, the most comprehensive of the bills bar any effort to remove any monument, but also change the name of any street or any park, not just to military veterans, but to any historic figure. At the other end of the spectrum are bills or statutes that apply only to members of the military who served in specifically named conflicts. Right in the middle of that spectrum is Representative Carmody's bill. I just want to let you all know it's not overreach. It is not a radical approach. It's what virtually every other sister state of Louisiana has done.
Thank you, sir. Next, identify yourself, please.
I am Jonathan Mackey from New Orleans, Louisiana, born in Thibodaux, Louisiana. Before I get into what I wanted to say, my prepared speech, I wanted to give you all a little bit of a news update that I just received not 5 minutes ago. The beautiful Joan of Arc statue in New Orleans was vandalized by anarchists and cultural savages last night. It was covered by the words saying, "Fear us, Antifa." So if you don't know who these people are, please educate yourself on these people. These are the same anarchists that causing mayhem all over the country, causing fires and destroying cultural and historical landmarks. So please, please, I ask you, become aware of these people. They were at Jefferson Davis's memorial the other day. So I wanted to give you a news update. Okay. Well, since we're here in Baton Rouge, I wanted to let you, say one thing. Many probably don't want me to mention in this room. The nickname of the LSU Tigers was named after Lee's Fighting Tigers. These men were made U.S. veterans by an act signed into law by President Dwight D. Eisenhower, May 23rd, 1958. Thus, I agree with LSU's nickname, and any memorial to them should be protected too. This should happen in any parish in Louisiana or any county all over the United States. This whole thing came up because as a culture today, we subscribe to this dangerous ideology called presentism. It is extremely dangerous. This is judging historical figures and past figures by using our modern day perspectives and moral codes. This sort of dangerous perspective causes knee-jerk reactions that lead us down a horrific, slippery slope with nothing more than division of citizens and destruction of what makes our culturally diverse heritage unique. There should be another layer of state protection that prevents these knee-jerk reactions, a system of checks and balances as the U.S. government has. Committee, thanks for having us today and hear us. We have a choice to make in Louisiana. Please don't subscribe to this nasty view of presentism and be on the side of these anarchists, and let this at least go to the state floor for a fair hearing. I ask you that today. Thank you.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
I'd like to call up George McKeska. What is it? You pass it. Okay. Kurt Bouchert. Kendall Coward. And Donna Guichard. If you would come forward. Ladies, who wants to go first? Please identify yourself.
Yes, hello everyone. My name is Kendall. and
Be
I'm from-
close to the mic if you don't mind.
I don't do this very often, I apologize.
We'll help you.
My name is Kendall Coward. I'm from New Orleans.
You good?
Is that better? Oh yeah, I can hear myself now. Okay, we're good. All right, my name is Kendall Coward. I'm from New Orleans. On a side note from what I have here today, my husband is a military veteran. He didn't serve a city. He served everybody in America, every one of you here, and not just a city. I stand before you today as a granddaughter of two World War II veterans and a wife of a veteran. My husband graduated from West Point in 2007. In less than a year of graduation, and with only months of training under his belt, he was deployed with the 14th Engineer Battalion to Iraq for a year and a half as a part of the surge of 2008. After only being home a year, he was deployed to Afghanistan. My husband served in combat as a route clearance platoon leader, protecting other soldiers and civilians from deadly improvised explosive devices on the roads of Iraq and Afghanistan. Fortunately, my husband came home safely, but we will never forget those who did not come home and their families. HB 71 is a nonpartisan bill. This is an issue of remembering and honoring those who fight before us, who are currently fighting for us, and for those who will fight for us in the future. Not only do soldiers serve bravely abroad on the front lines, but the spouses and families serve bravely at home. As a military spouse, the feelings of sending a loved one to war are loneliness, sadness, worry, anger, heartbreak, and love. Wondering when you're going to get the next phone call or email, counting down the days until they come home, smelling the favorite shirt that was left behind so you have a piece of them like the one I have on today. Those feelings and sentiments are the same amongst spouses and families, regardless of wars fought before us or the wars that we are currently fighting now. The monuments are not only a testimony to the veteran, but they are a memorial and something to hold on to for families. The effects of war are real. They don't go away. For many families, the grief is passed down through the generations. For over 200 years, American soldiers have fought for and died over wars our country's leaders thought just. Many years later, when historians or politicians declare a war unjust or immoral, does that negate the ultimate price these soldiers and families paid? Soldiers don't make policy. Elected leaders do. It's no secret that the wars my husband fought in were unpopular and today viewed as mistakes. It breaks my heart to think that years from now, Americans will be allowed to destroy and desecrate memorials to their sacrifices. In 2011, one of my husband's soldiers came home as a triple amputee. In 2009, another one didn't come home to his family at all. These men and women deserve better.
Thank you. You need to wrap up. Thank you. Next.
Hello, my name is Donna Guichard. I'm an 8th grade Louisiana history teacher at Adams Middle School in Metairie, Louisiana. I've been teaching for 18 years, and I've always wanted this subject. I had to wait for 2 people to die and 4 people to retire before I could get that position, but now I have it. And I am excited. And my students always say they hate social studies, but I said, you hate social studies because you've never had a good teacher who made it interesting and fun. And that's what I do. I will stand on my head for my students, and I will do whatever it takes to get them to learn about the state of Louisiana. And they know everything about the state of Louisiana because I ingrain it in their heads, okay? I show them the pictures in the book, and I encourage them to go visit the statues. They know that PGT Beauregard's in front of City Park. They know that Andrew Jackson is in front of St. Louis Cathedral. And last year, I took them on a field trip to the French Quarter. When they saw that statue and when they saw it and the St. Louis Cathedral, they were so excited. Oh my God! That's what we learned in class. This is where the Battle of New Orleans took place, etc. And they were excited about history. And when we were there, we saw another monument, and his name was Billy Nungesser. He happened to be in the French Quarter at the time we were there, and they were 10 times more excited because they saw who was now the lieutenant governor. I love teaching this subject, and I'm here to help my students, not only past students, but present students. Some of my students are from Serbia now. Some of my students are from Egypt now. And it does not matter where they came from. And I don't care what color they are. Black, white, pink, purple, it does not matter. My job is to get them to learn the history of this state. And I cannot do it if I have to tear out the pages of history that we're tearing down now. And on the last note, what I'll say is, I explained this whole issue to all of my students. I have 186 students. And I explained the issues, both the pros and the cons, and then I took a vote. I had 2 students who said they wanted the monuments to come down. And I asked them, why did you want the monuments to come down? And they said, because my mom told me. This generation of students that I'm teaching now is not the generation of people that want these statues taken down. The kids that I teach today aren't interested in race and statues. They're just interested in history and learning in school. And those kids I represent. Please pass this bill for my kids and the future of the kids who are going to come from other countries and live in our state. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next. Please identify yourself.
Hi, my name is Kurt Booker, and I live in New Orleans, Louisiana. And I wanted to start off by saying that my family might kill me for saying this, but my grandfather voted for David Duke, and he also voted for Barack Obama. So we have a very, very, diverse culture in this state. People change, people heal, and that's what we need to do. And I really believe that these monuments to our military veterans need extra protection. I fully believe that local government is almost always best because local people know the person on the next block. They know their streets. They know their local fireman. They know the local cop. They know what the budget needs to be. But some things need extra protection. If the city council up in Wyoming decided tomorrow to vote that Yellowstone Park should be closed and we should go mine for oil and coal up there, everyone would freak out. If the city council in Arlington, Virginia decided that the Iwo Jima Memorial should be torn down because some Asian Americans are offended, everyone would freak out. We need extra protection for some things. I was in Mexico City last year for a wedding, and I was walking down the main street of the entire country, and there was a statue of Christopher Columbus, and 100 yards down was a statue of the last Aztec emperor. I'm probably saying this wrong. I think it was Cuauhtemoc. Well, we all know from current morals what Christopher Columbus and people did to indigenous peoples, but the Aztecs, they enslaved people, they killed people on top. They had human sacrifice on top of their pyramids. The Mexicans have protections, and they embrace the two colliding cultures. We should look at the big picture of this and this slippery slope where this is going. This is not going to end at Civil War monuments. This is going to end where 20, 30 years from now, we're going to be defending churches. We're going to be defending crosses where people are going to want them torn down. This is not going to end. We're going to be fighting this battle for decades if something is not done now. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank y'all very much for your testimony. I'd like to call up Peter Glover, Charles Masala, and Steve Jones. Please identify yourself before you begin speaking. Whoever.
Go first. How you doing? My name's Peter Glover. I reside in Kenner, Louisiana. I'm a United States Army veteran. My father was a Vietnam veteran. My grandfather was World War II veteran. When my grandfather seen a World War II museum, I never seen him so happy in his life. Representative Stagney, he knows about 2 years ago the traveling wall for Vietnam came to Kenner. It brought much joy to my father to see that. I'm hoping one day that I see a monument for the comrades that I've served with. I ask y'all to support House Bill 71, support our veterans monuments. When I joined the military, I served with every nationality, every person there was, and I consider them all to be my brothers and sisters. And it means a lot to me to, anytime I see a monument honoring a veteran, and I ask y'all to protect them. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. My name is Charles Gino Marsala of New Orleans. My grandfather was Gino's of Monroe. You might have enjoyed his cheese bread or his minestrone soup if you've been through Monroe. He fought against racism, against Italians and African Americans for most of his life. I became mayor of Atherton, California, near Stanford University about a decade ago, and I was one of the 24 recent U.S. Senate candidates for Louisiana. I traveled the state, saw many monuments, met many people. I was running on environmental issues, senior finances, and education. Today, I host a Facebook page called PGT Beauregard, which has 5,000 followers, and over 1 million people saw the content we put out in the past week. There's a website we have called SaveNolaHeritage.org, and we've made videos educating people on what these 4 men did, or these 4 monuments did. At the state capitol here, as I walked in, I saw numerous markers for the landmarks that are around here. There's an Indian mound burial. There's a monument to George Washington, who owned slaves. And New Orleans city government has refused to put up markers to the landmarks for these 4 monuments that might explain to people why they were chosen to put up to begin with. It took over 20 years for most of the monuments for the funds to be raised $1 at a time from the neighbors who wanted to honor these men for various reasons. One might know that Liberty Monument was not about racism as we hear about. There's a book that's out that I bet few have read. Nobody has talked about the fact that 2 congressional committees cleared those men of that battle. It was actually fought on voter suppression and gun control at the site that the guns were confiscated by the police. Somehow, Mayor Shakespeare, 17 years later, after he allowed the hanging of 11 Italians in the Who Killed the Chief story, turned it into a racial monument. Several years later, Mayor Walmsley, seeking national office, put a racist plaque on it. And ever since then, we've accepted that it's a racist monument. We've never thought about the fact that the names of those police officers that died are on that monument, as are the residents who finally said enough with voter suppression. We need to look back and also see that Robert E. Lee is by the World War II Museum. He's on a mound. That honors 12,000 Louisianans that fought under him as Lee's Tigers. Eisenhower said that without Lee and studying Lee, he might have lost World War II. It's at the entrance to the World War II Museum. Jefferson Davis adopted a black child during the Civil War. He financed the sale of his plantations in the 1850s to his former slaves after he trained them how to run it. And they won Best Cotton 4 years later in an international competition. Robert E. Lee said slavery is a moral and political evil. PGT Beauregard, his chant when he ran for mayor was equal rights, one country, one flag, one people. We're forgetting that because we don't want to put monuments up to say what these people did, that they could have been progressive people in their era. I want to thank you for your time, and I hope you'll forward this to the full body for consideration. Thank you.
Mr. Jones, please identify yourself.
I'm Steve Jones from St. Bernard, Louisiana. I don't have too much to say. I just want to say, as everyone knows, that New Orleans is a historical tourist town, and tearing down 3 main monuments in the city is similar as if Rome was to tear down the statues in Rome because the Roman Empire wasn't very politically correct, or tearing down the pyramids in Egypt because, it was built by slave labor. I mean, you have to draw the line, and I'm hoping that you'll do so by supporting this Bill 71. And thanks for your time.
Thank you all very much for your testimony. I want to call up Bernie Cyrus and Tom Angers. probably butchered that name. Andrews. Okay, thank you. Go right ahead, whoever wants to go first.
I'll be glad to go first. My name is Tom Andrews, the way we pronounce it. I'm an attorney in Lafayette. I'm an active member of the Attakapaw chapter of the Sons of the American Revolution. This is an issue I've thought about and discussed with so many private citizens, and it's certainly on the mind of every Louisianian. Several points I wanted to make. When you're talking about war veterans, you need to think about what they went through. Some of them were killed, some of them were wounded. Many of them had post-traumatic stress disorder. They saw their friends killed. We need to remember the price they paid. And we should not let politics, the politics of any war. I think of the old saying that old men fight wars, but the old men do the politics of the war, but the young men run the war. They're the ones who are fighting the war. We need to remember that and not hold soldiers. Soldiers are a professional class of people. I personally knew two gentlemen who fought in World War II who had severe PTSD, and these were very outstanding people. So the old idea of battle scars is very real. A lot of soldiers go home with battle scars, emotional and physical. And when you honor them with a statute during their lifetime or subsequently, it is terrible to dishonor them, because you dishonor not only the honoree, but you also dishonor the citizens who erect the statutes. You think of all the citizens committees that erected all these statutes. You know, if they get involved legally, you start removing statutes. You know, if my grandfather had helped erect a statute, I'd be the first one to file suit about it if it came down. You know, you need to remember the price and time and sacrifice of private citizens. You know, on the issue of the politics of wars, the Buffalo Soldiers were black soldiers who fought in the Indian Wars. The Indian Wars have been heavily criticized by historians about killing Native Americans, but you should never allow those soldiers to be dishonored because of the perceived perception of the politics of the wars. Statutes, remember, are national and state emblems. The statute of Andrew Jackson is the common heritage of every Louisianian, of every citizen. The same statute of Jackson is before the White House. That statute belongs to every American. It doesn't belong to any municipality. I see this bill as a chance to heal divisions, racial divides. My father fought in World War II, and he was a conservative Republican who ran on the Goldwater ticket. But he was also president of the Louisiana Press Association. He stood up for black voting rights in the 60s because he served with black soldiers. So this is a chance to honor all soldiers of all races. Let's get together and let everyone honor their own. If the Armenian Americans want to do a statue to an Armenian soldier, we should be able to do it. Let all peoples honor their own. All minorities, all citizens.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Next.
Good morning, and it's a pleasure to be here today. My name is Bernie Cyrus. I'm a 25-year-old veteran of Louisiana state employees, I'm proud to say. And I'm also the former president and co-founder of Rock Against Racism, which we started to fight against David Duke, and it became an international deal with the help of Quincy Jones and Dr. John and a lot of musicians. I also co-founded and responsible for building over 33 monuments to African Americans in New Orleans today that serve on the levee in Algiers, representing jazz music. What I'm here today is to tell you I'm really conflicted because we have failed our children in education, and it was so heartwarming to see the young lady come speak about education, because we don't hardly teach about the war of this between the states, or the Civil War, whatever you want to call it. We hardly talk about it in schools anymore, but we need that dialogue, and we need to study these men that were not only Confederate veterans, but United States war heroes that fought in the Mexican War and the Black Hawk War. And Mr. Landrieu, I'm ashamed to say, unlike me, who I'm proud to tell you right now, my great-grandfather on my mother's side, maternal, was a Union soldier of the 82nd Afro Corps who was a runaway slave. And I'm here to represent him as I am to represent my paternal great-grandfather, who was a German immigrant who never owned slaves and fought at the Battle of New Orleans and Fort Jackson in the invading Union Armada. And the thing about it is, if we knew more about these men, and you've heard testimony today how they've worked pre-war and after the war to fight segregation and so forth, we know that they deserve this veneration, primarily because they served their country in battle, but secondarily because they also served the people in the community. And Mr. Landrieu, he might not be proud of his heritage, but I'm proud of mine, and I'm telling you what it is. And if we don't teach young people to look at the big picture and understand that one, and please interrupt me if you have a major hard question. I'm a Civil War historian, and I'm an author. I'll be glad to answer any question. They were not traitors. The secession was legal, and they did not start the war. There's empirical evidence right now that Abraham Lincoln started the war, and the war records prove it. It's a fact. Dig it and study it. Don't destroy it. Thank you very much.
Thank y'all very much. Appreciate your testimony. I want to read into the record some cards that are present and in support but would not like to speak. Douglas Smith, Ann Red, Carol Lee Thompson, Angela Neff, Deidre Fagan, Glenda Castilla, Castro, thank you. Steve Alvarez, M. Ellis Frater Jr., Natalie James, Kathleen Frater, Aurelie Collada, Valerie Viosca, Diane Viosca, Janelle Weber, Berlene Trosclair, Joseph Sabissa, Tina Lemoyne, Dana Farley, Kathleen Malone, Dara Hell, Linda Morrow, Joan Faribault, Pat Gallagher, and Aaron Hergett. All in support, wait, one more, George McKessa, all in support, not wishing to speak. I do have some cards who are present and would provide information if requested. James Thompson, Brian Trasher, Kathleen Trolson, Paul McKee, and Mary Labre. We do have some cards in opposition that do want to speak. We'll call you up, 3 at a time. Ryan Burney, Rodney Braxton, and Mary Patricia Ray. Okay, let me get some other people up here with you. Stephen Kennedy. And Sarah Omojola. Is that close, baby? Yeah. Thank you. Come on up. Identify yourself before you begin speaking. Sorry, Mr. Braxton. Catch you next time.
Okay.
No, what? No, y'all go first. Who's first?
Go ahead. Go ahead. My name is Ryan Burney. I'm the Deputy Mayor of External Affairs for the City of New Orleans. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members. And thank you, members of the military and veterans who are with us today, for your service and for your dedication to our country. We obviously come before you today, though, to testify in opposition to this bill and respectfully ask that you vote no. First and foremost, the City of New Orleans objects to the state trying to tell the people of our city what to do with our property. We believe, like many of you actually, that what governs locally governs best. And the people of New Orleans, through their elected leaders and their elected government, have a right to do with the people's property in the city. The mayor and the city council were democratically elected and empowered to make decisions about public property and public spaces. This process began in New Orleans in 2015, following all city laws and will end in New Orleans in 2017. After multiple hearings, historic review committees, and more, the democratically elected council voted 6-1 in favor of removal. This is not about regulation, as other people have mentioned. This is about property rights. The 4 statues in question are all owned by the city of New Orleans and sit on city-owned property. That's why the district and appellate courts at the state and federal level, after more than a year and a half of legal disputes, have affirmed the city's right to move these statues. With the addition of public proposition, I'm sure that many of you have heard the arguments to wait and just put it to a vote of the people. The refrain to wait has been common from opponents of African American rights, women's rights, LGBT rights, and more. Wait has almost always meant never is a common refrain from Dr. King. Just because you disagree with the people of New Orleans and the government of New Orleans, which is certainly entitled to do so, does not make it good policy to inject the state into this strictly local property rights matter. And for that, this is a bad bill. About the 4 monuments in question and why they were selected, which provide context for why that we don't believe that this is a slippery slope. These 4 monuments were selected because they were put up not as a reflection of the merits or accomplishments of individual historical figures, which can be debated, but rather why they were erected and how they fit into our city's history and inform our city today. The historic record is clear that the Lee, Jefferson Davis, and Beauregard statues were erected as part of a movement which became known as the Cult of the Lost Cause. The cult had one goal: rewrite history to glorify the Confederacy and perpetuate the idea of white supremacy. More, the Battle of Liberty Place monument is a well-known shrine of white supremacy, which was put up to honor police officers.
Okay, thank you. That's the end of your time. Next.
Good morning. My name is Stephen Kennedy. I want to start off by a quote from Otto von Bismarck, who once stated that laws and policies are like sausages. You never want to see them get made. My name is Stephen Kennedy, and I'm an urban planner, and we were taught that we should focus on the social, economic, and environmental aspects of our communities to improve them. I attended Tulane University, and I totally agree how we have been depicted here today as anarchists. Tulane is a prestigious university that is a strong asset for the state of Louisiana, educating many of this state attorneys, elected officials, and civic leaders. I'm here on the behalf of Justice and Beyond, a coalition of religious, labor, student organizations, community leaders, and small business owners, all focused on improving the communities in which we serve. Far too often, African Americans across this country have been told, get over it. Get over it. Yet today, they ask this body to tell the city of New Orleans to get over it. The Civil War was fought not because the South, which includes Louisiana, wanted to abide by the law, but because the South wanted to succeed from the Union. Succession was sought because of the South aspirations to continue prosperity from free slave labor. Earlier, I heard Colonel Maness state that pro-monument folks were being treated like those during the civil rights movement. I feel that statement is disingenuous to those who had their heads beaten in, hung from trees, and those blasted with hose pipes. Another supporter of this bill stated that the polls show keeping these monuments up were good for politics. Polls also told us that Hillary Clinton would be the next president, and we know the results of those polls. Polls are just that, polls. Over the years, we've debated over state rights with President Barack Obama's administration surrounding the health care bill and whether the Affordable Care Act should be up to the states to decide. Courts have decided that the city of New Orleans has the right in protecting the public interest of its citizens. Now you have a group approach this body this body, and ask you all to supersede the decisions that have been made in court, as Mr. Burney has stated earlier. There was a long debate over this topic, and our city unanimously decided that these symbols shouldn't be in our public space. I ask that you allow the city to govern itself. The 5th and the 14th Amendment allows for due process of law and equal protection of law. The law has been used in this country historically to keep people of color as second-class citizens. These monuments are only an honor to those who sought to keep people that looked like me as second-class citizens. For that reason, Justice and Beyond is greatly opposed to House Bill 71. Thank y'all for your time.
Thank you, sir. Yes, ma'am.
Good morning. I'm Sarah Mojla. I'm the Policy Counsel with Southern Poverty Law Center, and it's important for me to state that I'm not an anarchist. I'm a native New Orleanian. I graduated from LSU. And, I'm here to talk about the removal of the Confederate monuments, that it's not about erasing history. It's about understanding our history and addressing the injustices of the past. It's an effort to end the government's endorsement of a symbol that has always represented the oppression of an entire race. These historical symbols belong in museums and other educational settings, where people can see them and learn the full history of slavery, the Confederacy, the Civil War, and Jim Crow. While some people see the Confederate symbols as emblems of Southern pride and heritage, the questions must be asked, whose heritage? The heritage not hate argument ignores the heritage of African Americans who were enslaved by millions in the South and later subjected to brutal oppression under the white supremacist regime of Jim Crow. Our democracy is based on equality under law, and public entities should not prominently display symbols that undermine that concept and alienate an entire segment of our population. Individual citizens still have the right to fly a Confederate flag or have their own monument, even if it offends people, because that's their First Amendment right. But for the government, and for our government, which is supposed to serve all citizens, we shouldn't endorse a symbol that represents the oppression of a group of its citizens. This is not a freedom of expression issue. And in 2016, the Southern Poverty Law Center documented more than 1,500 symbols of Confederacy in public spaces as part of its report, Whose Heritage? The SPLC encouraged local governments to place those symbols in settings such as museums where people can learn the full history of the Confederacy. We have found that at least 60 such public-funded symbols of the Confederacy have been removed or renamed since a white supremacist attempt to spark a race war in 2015 by killing 9 black parishioners in a church in Charleston, South Carolina. After photos of the killer with a Confederate flag surfaced, communities began to reevaluate the public display of these Confederate symbols. And so I urge you to vote no on HB 71, and I'm happy to share any of the data I just mentioned with the committee.
Thank you all so much for your testimony.
Thank you.
Hold on, excuse me. You press your button, Rep? Well, okay. That's because we got somebody else. Okay, you got it, Rep Jenkins.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to ask some questions of the mayor's assistant because, the overriding concern that I have, of course, we respect veterans, all veterans of any war. I don't think anybody up here has that kind of disrespect. But my overriding concern is taking authority from local government. So this is what I'm trying to find out. In this particular instance, I heard you say there was some public hearings. How did this get started in New Orleans? Someone introduced an ordinance or something to remove some specific memorials?
That's correct. Obviously, this is an issue. It's not a new issue. It's an issue that's been fought for a long time, over many decades, including the Battle of Liberty Place statue, which was going to be moved many decades ago. So the city council, in response to a federal lawsuit, put a ordinance on the books, a law on the books that said there would be a public process for removal of statues, and you'd have to deem it a public nuisance. There was, for background, a racial reconciliation project going on in the city that was community-led and citizen-led. As part of that, many individuals, white and black, across the city came together in groups and came up with their own projects. As part of that process, the mayor announced his intention to also explore some of the other monuments that were up as it had been brought to him by various other people. The four were the 3 that were put up as part of the Call to the Lost Cause, which was a period, obviously, decades after the Civil War ended, to kind of rewrite the history of the Confederacy and the Civil War. The city it had to go through the Historic Districts Landmarks Review Committee.
And
It went
when that particular committee, that's a citizens committee?
It's Citizens Committee.
So we had an ordinance
of the government. It's
Wait a minute.
members of the people of New Orleans are appointed by the government to sit on a committee. So it's a citizens committee.
So okay, it's a
All right, we're gonna
average citizens serve on the Historic Districts Landmarks Review Committee,
And
as
all I'm
well as
trying
the
to
Human
do-
Relations Commission. Then the City Council voted on the final ordinance.
Okay, I'm just trying to see if there was a process as opposed to some arbitrary decision to remove
Yes,
something.
there was a process.
So
Please hold your comments down, please.
So that was an ordinance, and then it went through some citizen committees.
Yes.
All right. So after it came from the citizen committees,
It went to the council.
It went to the council.
And the council voted yes,
That-
6-1.
Right. But it was just for these particular.
Just for these particular ones.
So
And to
that-
do anything else, it would have to go through
The
that
same
entire process, a separate process.
All right, that was what my second question was going to be. So if there was any attempt to remove a Revolutionary War memorial, it would have to go through the same kind of a process?
Yeah, I mean, and in fact, it's even a stricter threshold because this is about deeming it nuisance. So we had to provide testimony about how these particular sites have been the location of various demonstrations and racial violence over time. Obviously, in the wake actually of Ferguson and some of the other things, there were lots of desecration of the monuments. So the city was actually having to go clean them up back and forth. The Monumental Task Group,
All right.
lots of people have done that.
Hold up, sir. We're gonna ask you one more time to hold it down. We've been very cooperative on both sides of this issue. We don't need the slurring and the clapping. We don't need none of that. We're just about coming to an end. Please do not comment or say anything during testimony. That's the way we've been doing it, and we're not going to end up with a bad meeting here at the end. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but go right ahead, sir.
No, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And look, at the end of the day, it followed all the laws on the books, which is why the state and federal courts have deemed that the processes were followed. It's city-owned property on city-owned land, and we could move forward with these particular ones.
And that's, I'm just trying to make sure I understand that a process was involved, a local government process was involved, which at some point allows citizens to take this to court if they're aggrieved by the decision. And this went to court.
It did.
And the courts had an opportunity to look at it and felt like that process was proper and in order. And
It did. And at this point, the law in the city of New Orleans is that we shall take these down because they have been deemed a nuisance.
Okay. Now, there's an amendment that's been filed. I mean, in essence, says there ought to be an election on a proposition like this. I mean, does the local government have I'm just seeing the amendment for the first time today.
Well, this has been a 2-year process at this point. There's always been additional roadblocks that keep trying to be thrown up in the way at various points.
Thank y'all. That's the end. Thank you, Representative Jenkins.
All right, thank you.
We got someone else. Mr. Braxton is in the building. Come on down.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Rodney
Braxton.
Braxton, representing the city of New Orleans. A lot of what I was going to say has been covered, but I just want to make, 1 or 2 additional points. Just the other day we had a committee meeting, again, dealing with the state trying to preempt the authority of local government, and a statement was made that struck me, it struck the mayor, and the statement was that, we all are Americans, and we live under one flag. And I absolutely agree with that. My father, my uncles, they all served in the military. They were veterans. I'm very proud of them. But, a lot of the conversations we've been talking about here, when we're talking about veterans, it overlooks what Mr. Bernie was just talking about in terms of the Confederacy. Now, I know that Robert E. Lee and PGT Beauregard, and I guess to a certain extent Jefferson Davis, after the war, did a lot to try to bring folks together. Robert E. Lee asked for people to put away the battle flag and not fly it anymore. And my concern, and I think the city's concern in terms of when they were looking at this issue, is that the monuments to those gentlemen had nothing to do with what they did in the country after the war. It celebrated their role during the Confederacy. And that is what I think gave a lot of folks in the city of New Orleans pause. You know, I have a very good friend. We had this conversation. He and I have been friends 20 years, and he went to divinity school, very religious man, and we always talked about the books that we read. And one day he told me that, oh, Ronnie, you got to read this book. It's a great book. It's the biography of Robert E. Lee. He's such a great man. And I said, well, stop. Listen, there's nothing in that book that's going to convince me of that. And the reason being is that had he been successful, I wouldn't be on the phone with you right now. And, you know, you fast forward to when this came up and they mentioned Lee Circle, being from New Orleans, I was like, oh, you mean the traffic control device? And it was like, wait a minute, Robert E. Lee is up there. And it reminded me of that conversation. It gave me a new perspective on what was being done. You know, if we are going to live in under the United States flag, we ought to celebrate those who fought for the United States. That's the way I feel about that. And finally, the mayor also wanted me to say that we're not trying to destroy these monuments. We're not trying to put them away and hide them. We think that there is a place for them. And the state has parks. The state has resources. There's nothing preventing the state from acquiring them from the city and put them PG. There is a camp named after Beauregard. That's a good place for it. We tried to bring it to other places. Nobody wanted them.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We have two cards that do not wish to speak, but they're present and in opposition. Stephen Jackson and Mary Patricia Ray. Members, that's all the cards. What's the pleasure of the committee? What? Oh, you do now? Come change your card. We'll get it changed while you're here. I'm sorry, I might have read it wrong.
It's okay, I asked the clerk to change it.
Go right ahead. Introduce yourself.
I'm sorry. Good morning, members of the committee. Stephen Jackson, president of the Cattle Parish Commission, Shreveport, Louisiana. I'm here today in opposition to this bill for several reasons that have already been discussed. The first one I want to point out is that the state already has a system in place that empowers local government to deal with this issue. It's called the Local Historic Preservation Commission. If there is something that individuals want to preserve and protect, there's an application process similar to what I heard the gentleman from New Orleans talk about. If you want to protect a monument, a building, or an asset that you would like to see, you can submit an application to that commission. There are public hearings that take place. There's a process that goes forward. It is then submitted to those local governing authorities to be approved for protection. The other issue that I find with this is I want to take the emotions away, because whose history is relevant, whose history is not relevant can become subjective in a sense. However, this is a local issue. That's why local government has already been empowered through the state constitution already to set up the local preservation societies. The local government will also incur a cost with the amendment on the election. It costs Caddo Parish about $200,000 just to do a referendum election. And I can imagine what it'll cost East Baton Rouge Parish, New Orleans Parish to put on these elections. So there's a cost associated when we talk about doing a referendum. What also concerns me is that the bill does not provide any protections for any other groups of individuals, such as civil rights activists, feminists, or women's suffrage historical figures. There are all other kinds of historical figures that can be recognized and monuments dedicated to that other folks may feel need protections, and that is not included in this bill. We met with all of our local delegations. I heard the conversation come up earlier about the specific to Caddo. This was not one of Caddo's priorities that was submitted to all of our legislative delegation members at a luncheon. And so I don't want folks to think that this is something that Caddo Parish is asking for. We right now have a local task force that is put together. That is, I just got an email last night at about 7:30 saying that there are public hearings scheduled for all of May to talk about the issue with our courthouse and the monument there. And that's a process that's going to take place. And the parish commission is going to listen to what that citizens advisory committee that is comprised of local historians. It is comprised of individuals who claim ownership to the property. And we will take those recommendations into consideration. But we own the property.
Thank you so much. I appreciate your testimony.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, the problem is we got Representative Marcel. You have a question for this person? Okay, so you're going to be first once we close and everything. Is that what you want?
I was the only button.
Okay. We're going to get to everybody now. Representative Norton, is that you? Yes, sir. Welcome to the committee. Good to see you.
Thank you, sir. I'm so impressed by the effort that you all are putting forward to get things taken care of, and I just appreciate y'all.
Thank you for your comments.
You're welcome. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right.
First, welcome to the committee this morning, and it's good to see you, Commissioner. That's from my city, the mayor's city, and whoever else want to be a part, and Sam City, and anyone else that want to be a part of Shreveport. So thank you again. Just a quick question for you, because I know I'm on a time frame here. This historical committee, is it not only just in the city of Shreveport, but throughout the
the state constitution allows municipalities anywhere to set up historic preservations committees, and I believe Councilman Representative Jenkins was a councilman when we set ours up in Shreveport, and the honorable mayor over here was our mayor at the time, and there's a process.
Okay.
But any municipality or government can set one.
So this is not something that just happened on yesterday. These committees, historical committees, has been in municipalities for you know how many years?
I'm not sure. I believe it was enacted under the 1974 state constitution.
1974?
Correct.
So if anyone is interested in more or less being in opposition to this bill or any other bill related to this, they have an opportunity to go to this historical committee and voice their concerns.
Correct. And most of the larger municipalities, East Baton Rouge Parish, New Orleans, Jefferson, Caddo, they already have historic preservations commissions. And I believe the way it is set up is you have to have a certain number of historians dedicated to it. So you don't just have individuals there that are just, you know, this is my position and I'm stuck in it. So you have to have some factual experts on the committee.
For those who may not understand that process or understand that there is a committee that's been set up for many years, what would be 1, 2, 3 process that they would need to go to? Because there may be someone here today that may be interested in going to discuss that with that committee.
If I'm correct, and Mayor Glover can probably chime in, and Representative Jenkins can probably chime in, but I believe the Lieutenant Governor's office will help walk you through that process, because it's actually under the Department of Culture, Recreation, and Tourism, for which the Historic Preservation Commissions operate under. And so the state will help you, walk you through setting up that committee.
Okay, because I'm kind of under the impression, I'm just about to wrap up, that there may be those here from what I'm hearing and I'm listening to, it doesn't seem like they're aware of this, because it seemed like they're under the impression that this was just something that started, and today is a day to get it all out rather than going to that committee and voicing your concerns. But thank you so much, Commissioner. It's glad to have you here. And thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Does any other member have a question for the witness at the stand? Okay, I'm going to call on Representative Carmody to come close on the bill.
Mr. Chairman, committee members, and everybody that's here, thank y'all for taking the time. This is really what the process is about. It's a democratic process.
And as you can see, the bill is in a posture that it puts it back into the people's hands. Someone had asked me, they said, Thomas, what is your objective in bringing this bill forward? My objective is to stop the hate. These are military monuments, friends. If what your perception is that somehow or another that brings hate into your community, put it on the ballot. Let the people decide that. Let them stop the hate by their own actions. If it passes, that is the will of the people. That is what this country was founded on, my friends. That is why all of us are here representing people. We're trying to be the voices for our constituents. This has been a very good meeting this morning. I commend the chairman. I commend all of you for your patience. I commend the speakers for trying to be restrained in what they had to say. They were all very eloquent. But I think that this is a good bill. I would ask the committee members' consideration of passing this bill forward and assisting in stopping the hate. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Representative Carmody. Representative Smith, is it a question for the author?
It's a comment to the author.
Okay, because I got somebody else ahead of you. Hold on. Ms. Carmody, go back to the, if you don't mind. And because I do have somebody ahead of you on the bill. Just a comment, Ms. Pat? Okay, you got the floor.
Representative Carmody, you mentioned that you believe that that will stop the hate.
Yes, ma'am.
It is a proven statistic that you can legislate all the laws you want. You cannot legislate people's hearts.
Yes, ma'am, you're correct.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Pat.
Thank you,
Representative Pugh?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Carmody.
Yes, sir.
Make sure that I have everything correct here. Is that this is not an issue of the state telling a municipality or a parish or an area what to do. Is that true?
Yes, sir. It puts the discretion in the local voters to make that decision.
And again, like you said, it is to let the people decide.
Yes, sir.
Not the state, not the municipality, but the people decide what they want to do and where they live.
And this is all of Louisiana, Representative Pugh. It's not a particular community, parish, or particular site.
But statewide.
Yes, sir.
Okay. With that said, at the appropriate time, I move favorable.
Representative Pugh moves favorable on House Bill number 71. To which there is objection by Representative Smith. I will request, hold on just one second. Reverend Glover, you have a comment?
I have questions and comments.
Well, let's let you talk. Hold on just a minute.
All right, Mr. Chairman, can I just mention that I've already closed, and I guess I have the discretion to.
You do, but hold on
Thank
just
you.
a minute. You getting ready to get back in. Representative Carmody, Representative Glover has a question. Do you want to field any questions?
No, sir, thank you. I think we've debated this long enough.
Well, I don't know if you can comment on his closing. How about let's do that. We're going to keep this thing as much fair as we can. You got 3 minutes.
I have a request from that I want to ask Joe Bear for some images that I wanted to have put up, Mr. Chairman. I need your permission to have him put those up.
I don't know if we can do this after closing. I'm sorry, you didn't have your light pressed before we closed, huh?
Well, I was waiting for, because I knew that Rep. Marcel had hers pressed and was looking to make some comments, and I didn't want to interject myself into the discussion until I thought we were to the point.
Yeah, we got on questions with the witness, and that's why I could not call on a witness on any rep with her light pressed, so I had to take her off. That's the only reason why. When Representative Norton had a question and Representative Smith had a statement, that's why I had to take Representative Marcel off.
Mr. Chairman, I will follow your direction and certainly respect my friend and my colleague from Shreveport, and will take my time and express my comments with regard to the legislation. I know that earlier there were comments made regarding the history of the hospital in Shreveport. That was previously the Shreveport Charity Hospital that moved from the current site of our Shreveport Police Department, which used to be our Shreveport City Hall. When it moved from the location of corner of Murphy and Texas Avenue and went to its current location at Kings Highway.
In
It
Linwood.
became known as the Confederate Memorial Hospital. And I heard some folks speak with great pride earlier about the significance of that history. I would note for this committee that the name of that hospital right now is no longer Confederate Memorial Hospital. And that change was made in 1979. It had that name from 1953 to 1979. I think the change was made because there was an understanding amongst the people of Shreveport at that time that if we wanted to become a better, a more modern, a more progressive city, to have the first of its kind academic medical center, which combined a medical school, a teaching hospital, and a research facility all in one, that we wouldn't be able to try and become the progressive, modern 20th century community that we wanted to be with that particular facility still being burdened with the moniker of being the Confederate Memorial Hospital. I think that that was a visionary move on the part of the leadership that existed both in terms of Shreveport and the state of Louisiana at the time. I think that that was a decision that was largely driven by the desires and the interest of the people within the local community. Now, in 1979, Representative Carmody, had that gone for a popular vote in the city of Shreveport, it would have failed miserably. Now, it wouldn't pass now, but it would have passed back then, and we would still be burdened with being referred to for the last almost 40 years as the LSU Shreveport Confederate Memorial Medical School and Hospital. While I certainly appreciate and respect the effort that you're trying to represent here, it is in fact, unfortunately, a lost cause. It is a cause that needs to be placed within its proper context, and we need to be allowed, whether it's in Shreveport or New Orleans or Baton Rouge or the entirety of the state, to be able to move forward with making these types of decisions at the local level without the intervention of the state level and without the needed expense and complication of unnecessary public elections. We elect public officials to come and represent us, to express their opinions, to engage in debate and dialogue with regard to these issues, and then put them to a vote and allow us to be able to move forward. To complicate that by having the state interject itself into issues that should be left to the folks at the local level, to me, is unnecessary and is certainly inappropriate, and unfortunately, contrary to your
Thank you,
objective,
Rep.
perpetuates the hate.
Thank you so much for your comments. Representative Marcel.
Thank you. So I'm back in, right?
You got it.
First of all, let me just say that I have a lot of relatives and was married to veterans in the past. So I have a lot of respect for veterans. To me, this bill has nothing to do with protecting veterans. I believe that there is a process in place, as I was on the city council prior to here myself, that's already in place, and particularly in New Orleans, the Home Rule Charter. I have a problem with us usurping the authority of the local government. And I've said it not on this bill, on many others. I think that this is a way to go around the local authorities to get what you want when you don't get what you want from the local authorities. I believe that that is a slippery slope that we slide. But not only that, I believe that if this bill were to pass, and I want my colleagues to listen closely, if this bill passed, I do believe that the city of New Orleans would file a challenge in court, and they would win. So the question is, are we just passing something as a feel-good legislation, and we know that we already don't have any money, and we're going to have to pay for the litigation? Because I'll say again, the city of New Orleans will file a challenge if we pass this bill, and they will win. So if you put your name on this legislation, just understand that you're signing on for us to pay for litigation for this particular matter, and that's exactly what's going to happen. A couple of other things that I want to say. Statues are used to pay tribute and honor to those who everybody feels have done a great job. For us to sit here and say that for people to get over it is an insult to the African American community. So if we're going to say, let's get over it, let's get over slavery, then somebody could say, let's get over the fact that you want these monuments up there. And that's not what we're saying. We're saying follow the process that's already in place. For someone to have not walked in my shoes cannot tell me when to get over something. And so when I see African Americans still facing the type of things that we're facing now, it's difficult for me to sit here and breathe while somebody tell me to get over it. And that will be my final comments, and that's why I cannot support this measure. And not only that, there is a process with the Historical Preservation Committee that I would suggest you follow. And the statues are not being destroyed as many of people want to have this out here. They are being moved to a place where people can still see them. For the lady with the Louisiana history, they can be placed somewhere where it's a better setting for them.
Thank you,
so that's
Representative
why I'll be
Marcel.
voting against this measure.
Thank you. Okay, members, we'll have a roll call vote by Ms. Banks at this time. To get it clear, we're going to get Ms. Righteous to clarify what you're going to be voting on.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Pugh made a motion to report a House Bill 71 favorably, to which Representative Smith objected.
With amendments?
With amendments. I'm sorry. And so a vote for in favor would be to report the bill favorably. A vote no would be not to report the bill favorably.
Thank you very much. Everybody understands? We'll get the roll call started. Ms. Banks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Billiot votes yes. Representative Bowie votes no. Representative Davis votes yes. Representative Dwight votes yes. Representative Edmonds votes yes. Representative Hilferty votes yes. Representative Huval votes yes. Representative Jenkins votes no. Representative Lyons votes no. Representative Marcel votes no. Representative Norton votes no. Representative Pugh votes yes. Representative Richard votes yes. Representative Smith votes no. Representative Stagney votes no. Representative White votes yes. Representative Berthelot
Yes.
votes yes. 11 yes, 7 no.
All right, hold it down, please. Representative Glover, you need to make a comment?
You have a voting error. My name was not called.
All right. Let's do the roll call again. I'm glad you brought it up. I'm sorry, too. Ms. Banks, let's do it again.
And you can count me a couple of times since I'm big enough record that.
And you told me you had my right-hand side, too. I apologize. Yeah, and once the vote's taken, please, this is just one part of this process. Please hold it down. Let's do it again. Ms. Banks.
The objection was by Representative Marcel.
No. Smith.
Smith. Representative Billiot votes yes. Representative Bowie votes no. Representative Davis votes yes. Representative Dwight votes yes. Representative Edmonds votes yes. Representative Glover votes no. Representative Hilferty votes yes. Representative Huval votes yes. Representative Jenkins votes no. Representative Lyons votes no. Representative Marcel votes no. Representative Norton votes no. Representative Pugh votes yes. Representative Richard votes yes. Representative Smith votes no. Representative Stagney votes no. Representative White votes yes. Chairman Berthelot
Yes.
votes yes. 10-8 yes.
10-8, the bill will move favorable.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, committee members.
Representative Huval moves to adjourn. Members, thank you so much for staying. We appreciate all of you being here for the vote.
Lunch. Do you have lunch, Mr. Chairman? Lunch?
Members, we do have lunch next door. We did provide lunch for you. It's next door.
And I liked how you kept order. That was excellent.
You need some help doing this back?
No, the ladies will help me. I appreciate you, David. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Another fine meeting on a difficult topic.
Go back. Good to see you, buddy.
I'm here. You got it?
I'm trying to turn it off right now.